Hi, my name is David Bergmanson, Chief Science Officer at WatchER, and for June 16, 2021 edition of the World Weather Watcher, we're going to be drilling into rainfall patterns in West Africa and the consequences of drier conditions for farmers in that region. The last 30 days, we've been pointing out the dry conditions along the western part of the United States, the northern part of South America, but also the West Africa region, which we're going to be looking into more detail shortly. Also, a little bit wetter than normal conditions for the eastern part of India, the eastern part of Europe, and the continued drier than normal conditions for Southeast Asia. When we look at the anomaly of rainfall in West Africa, we see that it has been much drier than normal the past 30 days, all the way along the coastal regions of West Africa. And this is a real cause for concern because this is the main growing season, and these lower than normal rainfall patterns will impact on crop production, especially for crops like cacao. And we'll talk a little bit more about this for Côte d'Ivoire and Ghana. Now, when we look at these two countries, we see that the southern part of both of these countries is much lower rainfall than normal, although we do see a little bit wetter conditions in the northern part of each country. Now, we can actually drill into this in more detail by looking at the weekly rainfall charts, and we are showing here 4 regions in Côte d'Ivoire where the long-term normal shown in this gold line is showing increased variability on weekly rainfall ever since March, but especially the last month, we've seen much drier than normal conditions for all 4 of these locations in Côte d'Ivoire, although we do see rain in the forecast for the next 15 days, this area beyond the dotted line. Now, if we look over into Ghana, we see a similar trend where in the southern part of Ghana, it's been particularly dry, much drier than normal for the last 6 weeks, while in the north, it is drier than normal, but not as dramatic. Now, if we look at the precipitation anomalies globally, we will circle back and talk more about the Corn Belt of the United States and the impact of drier than normal conditions that will impact corn and soybean production for this season. And there's several articles this week reporting around the reduced yield projections for North America. We also have been talking a lot about Southeast Asia, and because these drier than normal conditions for Southeast Asia have persisted, it's likely to impact on sugarcane production in that region. Now, if we look to the forecast for the next 15 days, we see continued dryness in the Corn Belt of the United States, while we see a little bit better rainfall pattern emerging now for West Africa, which is welcome news. We see drier than normal conditions, though unfortunately persisting for India, as well as parts of Southeast Asia. Now, when we pivot to temperature, we've been talking a lot about hotter than normal conditions along the corridor of North Africa all the way through to southern Russia. And this has persisted, and especially in the Middle East and Kazakhstan, this is most notable. But we're also seeing warmer than normal conditions for the northern part of the United States as well. Now, when we look to the next 15 days, what's particularly concerning is we see extremely hot conditions along the entire west coast of Canada and the United States, which is a real cause for concern as it relates to forest fires as we enter into forest fire season now. We also see warmer than normal conditions for the eastern part of Europe, as well as the central part of Africa over the next 15 days. When we look at the critical ratio of precipitation over potential evapotranspiration, which is a key index for rain-fed agriculture with values below 0.8, signaling drier conditions for most crops that would induce a drought response and lower yields. And so we see that for the western part of the United States, Mexico, that this is well below the critical threshold required to support rain-fed agriculture. We also see, though, moderate stress in West Africa for the last 30 days. And we see that for much of Europe as they go into their cropping season, that there are pockets of drought that will impact any rain-fed agriculture production in the region. When we look to the next 15 days, we see that this dry belt is expanding in the United States, which is a real cause for concern for corn and soybean production this year. And on the flip side, though, we're seeing an increased rainfall pattern and therefore an increased ratio of P over PET for West Africa, which is welcome news, especially for rain-fed farmers in that region. So if we go back to the last 30 days and to the next 15 days, you can see the shifts that are taking place across the globe as we look at this critical index between precipitation over the evaporative demand in the environment. So moving on, as we zoom into this ratio of P over PET for West Africa, we see that for much of the region, this critical ratio is below what is required for rain-fed agriculture, the 0.8, the straw color. So we see much of the area is in light pink through to red, meaning that it's below the threshold for rain-fed agriculture. We zoom in particular to Côte d'Ivoire and Ghana, we see that for both of these countries, the P over PET is well below that required to support rain-fed agriculture. So we can expect issues of food security to emerge in the region as a result. And it'll also impact on key commodities like cacao and likely have a trigger on cacao or chocolate prices in the future. When we look into detail of what's actually been the trend for this key index in West Africa, we see that P over PET has increased in general for the northern parts of West Africa and has decreased for the southern parts of West Africa. And this has been predicted by the climate models, and our data just affirms that that trend is really taking place as we look at observed weather data, especially this critical index of precipitation over potential evapotranspiration. Now, if we look at the forecast for the next 15 days, there is better news for West Africa with regards to this key index, where for Côte d'Ivoire and Ghana, with the exception of the northern part of Ghana, conditions are much more conducive for rain-fed agriculture, which is welcome relief for farmers in the region. When we look to precipitation for the entire globe, we see this continued trend over the next 15 days for little to no rainfall for the western part of the United States. So tremendous concern here as we enter into forest fire season. We also see dry conditions for the central part of Africa, especially the southern part of Democratic Republic of Congo. And we see drier conditions, especially through the Middle East, obviously, given the time of year, but also for the southern part of Kazakhstan, which is a concern for their rain-fed agriculture. We see that Europe has a moderate amount of rainfall, as is much of the United States, and we also see that moderate amounts of rainfall are in the forecast for Southeast Asia. If analytics like this are of interest to you, I invite you to go to our adapter platform at apps.aware.com, where you can register for free to access our global weather data and analytical tools to start your journey of weather analytics so that you can understand how weather is changing where you live and how you respond to it. Until next week, take care.